At Brooke's wedding, her in-laws humiliated her 6-year-old daughter in front of 107 guests. "You are not a daughter. You are mommy's regret," they told her. 5 minutes later, their lives started to collapse. Weddings are supposed to start with butterflies. Brooke started with a threat, not an obvious one, not the kind that comes with sirens or smoke or someone shouting, "Call 911." No, hers started with a smile, the kind you only ever see on people who can destroy your life without raising their voice. Brooke walked into her own reception, hand in hand with her daughter, Tessa, still half convinced she was dreaming. Tessa looked like a tiny woodland angel someone had airdropped into a chandelier showroom. Her dress had a bow so big it kept swiveling like it was trying to rotate her entire soul. Tessa squeezed Brooke's fingers. "Mom," she whispered, "everyone's staring." "They're staring because you're beautiful," Brooke whispered back. That was half true. They were staring because Tessa was hers, and because Brooke's new in-laws had never quite forgiven her for arriving in their son's life with a child already attached, like she'd shown up at a gala carrying a backpack full of snacks. She spotted them at the head table, Deborah and Neil, smiling like everyone else in the room was an extra in their personal photo shoot. Their daughter Jenna lounged beside them in a dress that could fund a small art museum. Jenna lifted her glass at Brooke in a "congrats, brave little pauper" sort of way. Brooke's husband, wow, husband, Lucas squeezed her hand once more before being pulled away for pictures. She watched him go, feeling that stupid, swelling love she still wasn't used to. Then she looked down at Tessa. The girl's eyes were darting around the room like she was waiting for someone to tell her she was standing in the wrong place. "It's okay," Brooke murmured. "It's just a party." Tessa nodded, unsure. Brooke should have known the night was about to detonate right there. But instead, she did what she'd done her whole adult life, pretended everything was fine, and hoped no one bled. Deborah stood. She tapped her champagne glass. If dread had a sound, for Brooke it would have been exactly that, polished, polite, and impossible to escape. "Everyone," Deborah trilled, smiling at the crowd of distant relatives and semi-strangers. "As the mother of the groom, I'd like to welcome you all." Brooke's spine stiffened. Deborah's speeches were always knives disguised as etiquette. "We are, of course, thrilled for Lucas," Deborah continued, laying a hand on her son's shoulder like she'd sculpted him herself. "He has always made unexpected choices, but he's followed his heart, and that is what matters." People smiled politely. They didn't know what was coming. "When he told us about Brooke," Deborah said, turning her gaze toward the bride without warmth, "we were surprised. She wasn't the kind of partner we imagined for him, not the life path we pictured." Brooke's throat tightened. "And when we realized his future would include additional responsibilities," Deborah added, eyes sliding pointedly to Tessa, "we had to trust Lucas knew what he was taking on." Tessa froze beside the table. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood she was being talked about like she wasn't in the room. Neil nodded beside Deborah, slow and approving, like she was reading a script he'd written. Jenna didn't nod. She just smirked into her champagne, a tiny, satisfied smile that said, "Finally, someone's saying it out loud." Deborah continued smoothly, smiling as if nothing were wrong. "Some men take the traditional route, start fresh, build from the ground up. Lucas chose a more complicated beginning, but he has always liked a challenge." A low ripple moved through the guests. the kind of ripple that says everyone heard it, everyone understood it, and nobody knew where to look now. And so, Deborah concluded, raising her glass, here's to Lucas, always embracing what life places in his path. Not who life placed in his path. What? The toast ended with stiff, uncomfortable applause. People clinked glasses because that's what people do when they don't know how to respond to cruelty wrapped in crystal. The quartet scrambled to start playing again, like music could fix what had shattered. Inside, Brooke wanted to flip the entire table. Outside, she smiled. "Tessa," she whispered, kneeling beside her daughter, "you look perfect." Tessa stared at her shoes. "Mom," she whispered, "am I the thing she said? The responsibility?" Brooke's chest cracked. "No," she said, "you're the best part of everything." But Tessa didn't lift her head. She didn't believe it. Brooke could see it. And that was the moment something shifted under Brooke's skin. The quiet, furious knowledge that this wasn't over. That they'd meant every word. That they'd been waiting years to say them. The night blurred again. Photos, dancing, forced small talk. But she couldn't get Tessa's expression out of her head. Then, sometime after dessert, Brooke realized Tessa wasn't beside her. Her daughter's plate, half a slice of cake, sat abandoned at the table. Brooke's pulse spiked. She scanned the dance floor, the gift table, the hallway. And then she saw Tessa, near a quiet corner, standing very still. Deborah was with her, straightening Tessa's dress, smiling down like she'd found a smudge she needed to polish off. Brooke started walking toward them, still too far, still too slow. "That's better," Deborah murmured. "You want to look nice when you're around people like this." Tessa didn't answer. She looked faintly seasick. Deborah lowered her voice, leaning just a little closer. "You know, sweetheart," her tone softened, warm like a blanket someone meant to smother you with. "You're not really a daughter here. You're mommy's regret." Brooke's heart stopped. She wasn't breathing. She wasn't sure she even blinked. Tessa's face crumpled. Confusion. Shame. Something sharp she didn't have words for. Brooke opened her mouth, but someone else got there first. "What did you just say?" Lucas. He was suddenly right there, jaw clenched, eyes burning with something Brooke had never seen aimed at another living person. Deborah straightened, mask snapping back into place. "Darling, don't be ridiculous," she said lightly. "I was simply—" "No," Lucas said. "Stop." Her smile faltered. He stepped between his mother and Tessa. "Say it again." "Lucas," Deborah hissed. "Not here. You already did it here." Neil appeared too late, face tightening as he took in the scene. "What's going on now?" Lucas didn't look at him. He didn't look at anyone except his mother. "You told a 6-year-old she isn't a daughter," he said. "You told her she's a regret." There was a ripple around them, gasps, whispers, forks hitting plates. Deborah's face went sheet white. "I didn't—" She misunderstood. "Brooke always exaggerates." "I heard you," Lucas said. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He turned, walked straight back toward the center of the reception, and picked up the nearest microphone. People turned. Music died. Conversations dropped mid-sentence. Brooke felt her heart hammer against her ribs. "This wasn't planned," Lucas said, voice steady. "But I need everyone to hear this." Deborah froze in the doorway. "My daughter was insulted tonight," he said. By my own mother. A ripple moved through the crowd like heat. She told Tessa she isn't a daughter, he continued. She told her she's mommy's regret. Silence. Complete, painful silence. Let me make this very clear, Lucas said. Tessa is my family. If anyone cannot accept that, they are not welcome in our lives. Not now, not ever. Someone dropped a glass. Jenna's face went bright red. Neil looked like someone had unplugged him from reality. Mom, Dad, Lucas said. You need to leave. Deborah's voice cracked. Lucas, don't you dare. But he wasn't listening. He came back to Brooke, to Tessa. Let's go, he said softly. And just like that, they walked out of Brooke's wedding. Not running, not crying, just walking out of a room full of people who finally saw what Brooke had been trying not to admit. This wasn't over, not even close. And whatever came next, she wasn't ready for it, but they were. If anyone wanted to know how Brooke ended up standing at her own wedding, watching her 6-year-old get emotionally gutted in front of 107 people, they'd have to go back a little, not far, just far enough to remember that she was not always this steady, this sure, this woman who walked out of a ballroom holding her daughter like a shield. Before Lucas, there had been Jason. If you've never dated a man who could charm your entire friend group while simultaneously setting fire to his own life, consider yourself blessed. Jason had been handsome, funny, and the kind of broke that feels romantic when you're 22 and running on caffeine and delusion. They'd met in college. They'd shared late-night takeout and stress and dreams. Then 2 pink lines appeared, and reality hit Brooke like a falling piano. Jason said he was ready, then said he was just stressed, then said nothing at all because he was passed out drunk on the couch. The thing about loving someone who's drowning is that you start inhaling water too. The night he nearly dropped newborn Tessa because he couldn't stand straight, something in Brooke snapped. She packed a bag, put her 3-month-old in the car seat, and left before the sun came up. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just left. The custody battle wasn't a battle. It was a paperwork formality. The judge looked at the missed tests, the police incident, the absence of any evidence Jason remembered Tessa existed, and handed Brooke full custody without blinking. And then Jason vanished. No calls, no visits, not so much as a happy birthday kid scrawled on a gas station card. So it was Brooke and Tessa against the world. Brooke worked 3 jobs at once: babysitting, part-time admin assistant, whatever paid enough to keep the lights on. She learned that exhaustion can feel spiritual when it's protecting someone small. People love the phrase single moms are superheroes, but all it really means is we don't know how you're alive, but good luck. Eventually, she landed a full-time job at a company that had more glass walls than employees. She started at the bottom. She worked late. She brought leftover snacks home from conference rooms like she was raiding a pantry designed by a billionaire raccoon. And that's where she met Lucas. He wasn't the shiny, arrogant heir people whispered about. He was the guy who brought her the wrong coffee for 3 days in a row before admitting he'd been too nervous to ask what she liked. He was funny in that quiet way that sneaks up on you. He listened. He showed up. The first time he met Tessa was an accident. Brooke had been forced to bring her daughter to work when daycare closed early. Tessa sat under Brooke's desk with a coloring book, silent and serious. Lucas crouched down beside her, tie askew, tired eyes soft. "What are you drawing?" he asked. "Cats," Tessa said. How many? He asked. She shrugged. All of them. He grinned. That's a solid plan. Tessa looked at him like he'd just passed a test she didn't know she was giving. It wasn't some Disney moment, but it was real, gentle, unforced. That's when Brooke started thinking maybe, just maybe, life could be good again. Then came the part no one prepares you for, meeting your new partner's parents when you come with a child and a history. Lucas drove them to his parents' house, a mansion with a lawn so perfect it looked like it held its breath. Remember, he warned, they're very particular. Translation: they think their furniture has a higher net worth than most people. Deborah opened the door with a smile so polished Brooke could see her future anxiety in it. Brooke, Deborah said, looking her up and down like she was scanning a dress code violation. You look different than I expected. What did you expect? Brooke asked before her brain could stop her. Something flickered in Deborah's expression. A bit more corporate, she said, but this is lovely. Neil shook Brooke's hand like she was applying for a job he didn't want her to get. Then came the first real punch. And you have a daughter, he said to Lucas, from a previous relationship. Not said to Brooke, said about her, right in front of her. Lucas's jaw twitched. Deborah smiled kindly, the worst type of smile. It's admirable, she said to Brooke. Truly, single mothers have to work so hard. Brooke bit down on the urge to say something illegal. Dinner was worse. So, Neil said casually, cutting into his steak, you could have had anyone, but you chose someone who already did the hard part for someone else. Lucas set his fork down with a quiet, dangerous grace. Dad. What? Neil said. It's just a question. It was a warning. Brooke just didn't know how loud yet. They met Tessa a few weeks later. Deborah walked into Brooke's tiny apartment like she was touring a historical site. Oh, this is cozy. Tessa hid behind her mother's leg, clutching her stuffed giraffe. Deborah knelt down. So, this is Tessa, she said. How sweet. You must feel very lucky to be here. Tessa blinked. She didn't know what being lucky meant yet, but she understood tone. Jenna hovered behind them, scrolling on her phone. She's quiet, Jenna noted. I thought she'd be more active. She's shy, Brooke said. Jenna shrugged like she'd solved a small mystery. After they left, Tessa crawled onto her mother's lap and asked, Mom, am I lucky to go there? Or am I just visiting? It took everything in Brooke not to cry. Birthdays and holidays came and went. Jenna got jewelry and spa days. Tessa got sweaters, puzzles, and a lecture about gratitude. Deborah made comments about exposure to nicer things and broadening horizons. Tessa shrank a little more each time. Lucas tried. He really did. They don't mean it, he'd say. They're just old-fashioned. Old-fashioned is calling dinner supper. This was something else entirely. And every time Tessa whispered some new, quiet insecurity, Mom, do they like me? Do I belong there? A new crack formed inside Brooke. When Lucas proposed, it wasn't on a beach or at a fancy restaurant. It was at Brooke's kitchen table, with Tessa watching intently. He asked Tessa first. Can I marry your mom? He said. Will you still read bedtime stories? She asked. Every night, he said. Okay, she said. Then yes. It should have been perfect. But his parents reacted like he'd announced they were holding the wedding in a gas station. Deborah clapped a bit too stiffly. Lovely, she said. We'll just have to make sure everything is appropriate. They pushed for a huge wedding. They insisted Tessa needed a small role so she wouldn't be overwhelmed. They suggested she sit with a nanny. Lucas shut it down. She's standing with us. The tension simmered. In hindsight, the wedding wasn't a surprise. It was the inevitable finale of a story Brooke hadn't wanted to admit they were living. They'd spent years trying to make her feel like she didn't belong. At the wedding, they finally aimed at the easier target. Her daughter. And that was the moment everything broke. The moment Brooke realized they were never going to stop. And they hadn't even started yet. The morning after the wedding felt like waking up after a hurricane, one of those quiet, eerie ones where the sky is too blue and nothing feels real yet. Brooke opened her eyes to the sound of a tiny sniff. Tessa was curled at the foot of the bed, knees tucked under her chin, clutching her stuffed giraffe like it was the only solid thing in the universe. "Mom," she whispered, "is Grandma mad at me?" The question hit Brooke like a punch to the ribs. Lucas sat up beside her, rubbing his face with both hands like he was trying to scrub the entire previous night off his skin. He looked wrecked. They both did. "No," Brooke said. "You didn't do anything wrong." Tessa hesitated. "Then why did she say I'm what's that word again?" "Nothing you ever have to be," Brooke said quickly. Tessa nodded, but her eyes said she didn't believe it yet. They got dressed in silence, the air thick with exhaustion, and something Brooke didn't want to name: fear. Not for them, for Tessa, for the tiny crack they'd managed to put in her. They'd slammed the door on his parents at the reception. They both thought that meant something. Spoiler, it didn't. People love drama until they have to sit next to it. By Monday, whispers were floating through every room Brooke stepped into. Not that anyone said anything directly to her. No, this was the polite kind of gossip, the kind people whisper behind folders and in hallways with the subtlety of teenagers. "I heard she told the girl she wasn't a daughter. I heard he kicked them out. I heard she screamed." Brooke didn't scream. For the record, it was worse. She swallowed every single word. Lucas kept getting messages he ignored, then messages he couldn't ignore, then messages from people who pretended to check in but were obviously fishing. His parents, though? Silence. A dangerous kind of silence. The kind predators use when they're deciding what to bite next. It took about a week for the official news to drop. Brooke knew something was coming when she saw Lucas walk through the front door one evening looking hollow, like someone had scooped out all his certainty and replaced it with something sharp. He didn't say anything at first, just sat at the dining table with his head in his hands. "Someone die?" Brooke said lightly, because humor was the only coping mechanism she hadn't had to put in therapy. "Close," he muttered. She sat across from him. "Okay, hit me." He looked up, eyes red around the edges. "They're out," he said. "Out where?" He exhaled. "Out of their jobs." Brooke blinked. "You're kidding." "No." She pressed her palms flat on the table. "How?" "Emergency meetings," he said. "After the wedding." "Because of what they said to Tessa?" Brooke asked. "Because everyone saw," he said. "People who matter, people who can't unsee it." He ran a hand through his hair. "And because they've been slipping for a while. But this was the last straw." Brooke didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She didn't do anything except sit there and try to breathe normally while the world tilted a little. "And you?" she asked. He laughed, but it sounded like it hurt. They offered me the position. Your father's? He nodded. Oh. Brooke didn't know whether to hug him or pour a drink or ask if he was okay or all three. How are you feeling? She asked. I feel like someone dropped a throne on my lap, he said, and then set it on fire. Sounds healthy, she said. He didn't smile. They're going to blame you, he said finally. Both of them. I know. Her voice didn't shake, but her stomach did. And they're going to blame Tessa, he added, barely above a whisper. 2 days later, they came to the house. No warning, no call, just the doorbell being stabbed repeatedly until Lucas answered it looking like a man walking into an ambush. Neil pushed past him first. Deborah followed, face stiff, like she'd practiced crying and couldn't get the tears to cooperate. Brooke stood in the living room, and for a second, it felt like the temperature dropped. This is your doing, Neil snapped at Lucas. All of it. You embarrassed us, Deborah said, pointing at Brooke like she was the raccoon that knocked over her trash. You made a scene. You humiliated us in front of everyone. And now they've taken everything from us. Lucas didn't flinch. I didn't make you say what you said. It was a misunderstanding, Deborah shrieked. To a 6-year-old, he shot back. Neil stepped forward. You will go to them, he said. You will fix this. You will tell them your wife manipulated you. Lucas's voice cut in like a whip. No! You owe us, Neil growled. I owe Tessa more, Lucas said. The silence that followed could have cracked the walls. Deborah's voice dropped to something ugly. If you don't fix this, you're done. With us. No inheritance. No family. Nothing. Lucas laughed. Actually laughed. It was short and bitter and sounded like something snapping. Keep it, he said. If money means that much to you, keep every cent. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then Neil turned to Brooke. This is your fault, he said. You dragged him down to your level. My level? Brooke said. You mean a level where children don't get verbally kicked in the stomach? He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she smelled whatever expensive soap he used to wash off guilt. You have no idea what you've started, he said. There it was, the truth he'd been carrying under all that outrage, not sorrow, not regret, threat. Lucas stepped between them so fast, Brooke barely saw him move. This conversation is over, he said. Leave. Deborah inhaled sharply. You'll regret this, she whispered. Tessa stood in the hallway behind them, holding her stuffed giraffe and watching her grandparents like they were strangers. Lucas closed the door in their faces. Lock, click, silence. Tessa padded forward. Her voice was soft. Are they coming back? No, Brooke said. She wanted it to be true. She wanted to believe that losing their positions would finally shut them down. Tessa nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Lucas leaned against the door like he could hold back the world with his shoulders. Brooke touched his arm. You okay? She whispered. He nodded. He wasn't okay. None of them were. Because even though their jobs were gone, their power was gone. Their public image was cracked. The look Neil had given Brooke stayed lodged under her skin like a thorn. It said, this isn't over. And the worst part? She believed him. Because people like them don't disappear. They regroup, and they always go for the weak spot. Which, in their case, meant Tessa. Brooke didn't know how yet, or when, or what shape it would take. But she could feel it coming, like thunder beneath the floorboards. Brooke thought losing their positions would tame them. Spoiler, it didn't. Some people lose power and learn humility. Neil and Deborah lost power and immediately went shopping for new weapons. The first sign was a letter addressed to Brooke with alarming confidence, the kind of envelope that looks like it should come with a soundtrack. She opened it at the kitchen table while Tessa was drawing a cat with 6 legs, because more legs means more hugs. Brooke was halfway through admiring the alien animal masterpiece when her eyes hit the word custody. Her stomach hit the floor. "Lucas?" she said, voice too calm to be real. He walked in, saw her face, and went still. "Bad?" She slid the papers toward him. "Worse." He read, blinked, swore under his breath. "It's from Jason," he said. "He's filing for joint custody?" Brooke laughed, sharp and humorless. "He can't even manage custody of himself." "He hasn't seen her in 6 years," Lucas said. "How is he suddenly concerned about her well-being?" Brooke didn't have to answer. Her phone buzzed. Voicemail. She played it. "Hey, Brooke," a voice slurred. "Jason. So, I met some people. They said I should step up, be a dad. They're helping me get a lawyer. We'll talk soon." Click. Lucas stared at the phone. "Some people," he repeated. "Yeah," Brooke said. "I wonder who." The silence in their kitchen was thick enough to spread on toast. The next hit came 3 days later. A knock at the door. Polite, professional, deadly. "Hi," the woman said, flashing a badge. "I'm with Child Protective Services. We received a report." Brooke swore her heart stopped. Tessa peeked around the corner. "Mom? Who is—" "It's okay," Brooke said quickly, even though it wasn't even in the neighborhood of okay. The CPS worker stepped inside, clipboard ready to judge Brooke's entire motherhood by the placement of her throw pillows. "The report mentions possible neglect," she said, "and emotional instability in the home." "Emotional instability," Brooke repeated. "Well, I did cry at a Disney movie once, but—" Lucas squeezed her arm. Translation: "Stop joking before they think you're unhinged." They showed the worker the kitchen, the clean living room, Tessa's room, complete with stuffed animal explosion. Tessa clung to Brooke the entire time, small fingers sticky with crayon wax and fear. The woman knelt down. "Do you feel safe here?" she asked gently. Tessa nodded so hard, Brooke thought her neck might snap. "My mom makes pancakes," she said. "Good ones." The woman smiled at that. It helped. A little. When she left, she said, "At this time, I don't see anything alarming." Tessa asked, "Am I in trouble?" "No," Brooke said. "Are they going to take me away?" "No," she said again. This time, she wasn't lying. But the fact that Tessa had to ask, that broke something in Brooke she didn't know was still breakable. The custody hearing was exactly the circus she expected. Jason showed up looking like someone had ironed him badly. His lawyer, paid for by 2 vindictive retirees with too much time, tried to spin a narrative about wanting to reconnect and concerns about Tessa's stability. The judge asked Jason where he lived. He hesitated, asked about employment. He hesitated harder, asked about sobriety. He failed. A test. On the spot. Lucas squeezed Brooke's hand, and for a second, she thought she might cry right there. Not from fear this time. but from a grief she hadn't let herself feel about how small a man Tessa's biological father really was. The judge denied the petition so fast. The sound of the gavel felt like a door slamming shut on years of dread. It was over. Except it wasn't. Because losing didn't stop Neil and Deborah. It only made them desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. After the custody disaster, things got quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Calm before a tsunami quiet. Lucas threw himself into his new role. Brooke pretended not to notice how often he came home looking like someone had wrung the life out of him and hung him up to dry. Then one night he came in late, later than late, face pale. "We need to talk," he said. Brooke's heart dropped. "Who died?" "Not who." His voice cracked. "What?" He sat heavily at the table, rubbed his eyes, then said it. "They found fraud. At the company." "Whose?" Brooke asked, even though part of her already knew. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, long, tired, hollow. "My parents," he said. The room tilted. "Like the tax kind of fraud?" she asked. "Like the felony kind," he said. Brooke sat back. "Well, I guess they finally found a hobby." He didn't laugh. "Brooke, this is bad. Years of siphoning money, fake expenses, misreported accounts. Auditors found things in places they shouldn't even exist." "Why didn't anyone notice before?" she asked. "They hid it well," he said. "Too well, but when leadership changes, people look closer. They found everything." She stared at him. "And what happens now?" He swallowed. "The board forwarded it to authorities." "Because of you?" "No," he said firmly. "Because it's their legal obligation." "But could you have stopped them?" Brooke asked. He looked at her with something fragile in his eyes. "Should I have?" Brooke thought of Tessa, her quiet, shaking fear, her asking if someone would take her away, her small body pressed into Brooke's while a stranger scanned their home for danger that wasn't there. "No," Brooke said. "You shouldn't have." Lucas nodded once, like he'd been waiting to hear her say it. The next months were a blur of fallout. Neil and Deborah lawyered up. They negotiated. They panicked. In the end, they signed a deal that stripped away everything they'd ever hoarded. The house, sold. The cars, gone. The reputation, ashes. The friends, suddenly silent. The invitations, vanished. They avoided serious prison time because apparently money can buy good lawyers even when you're rapidly running out of it. But they didn't walk away unscathed, not by a long shot. They moved into a much smaller place, the kind with neighbors, and recycling bins, and no staff. Someone sent Brooke a screenshot of a news article. Their names were trending, not for good reasons. She didn't read the comments. She didn't need to. Tessa slept through the night again. She stopped asking if she was a regret. She started drawing cats with 4 legs again. Normal ones. She called Lucas Dad without hesitation. He cried in the pantry, quietly, thinking Brooke didn't hear. People sometimes asked Brooke if she felt vindicated. She didn't. She felt relieved, tired, protective, human. Sometimes she wondered if they had gone too far, letting everything play out. If they should have stepped in. If maybe, somewhere beneath all the cruelty, there had once been something good in Neil and Deborah. Then she remembered Tessa's small voice asking, "Why did she say I'm not a daughter?" And she knew the answer. So the question hangs there. Did they go too far, letting Lucas's parents lose everything? Or, after Neil and Deborah tried to rip Brooke's daughter out of her arms, was it exactly what they deserved?